Okay.
But my business model in 2000 was I was going to charge a 2% brokerage fee
Okay.
and pay my agents a salary.
All right.
So I said, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to flip my model. I'm going to charge 6%.
Right.
My business took off like a rocket. I was generating $1 million a month in brokerage fees. Well, Joe, listen, here's the good news. When I chose not to do a third season of The Deed on
Right.
CNBC.
Yeah.
I have not done one of these since then. I dropped off the face of the earth. Now, I've built a pretty substantial company since then. So I was nervous. This is my first one since I came back. Came back. This is my first one. I haven't come back.
Right.
I haven't gone away.
Yeah, you haven't gone anywhere. You've just been doing other things.
I'll start from the start, but I'll make it as quickly as possible. So I grew up in Ireland, small village, initially a small 2-room terraced house. We were properly poor, but everybody was poor, right? My mom worked several jobs, raised 5 kids in a little house. My dad was spectacular, and I learned from my father how to dream, but I learned from my mother how to get it done. My dad, every business failed, and I used to say he had an ability to go from failure to failure without ever losing any enthusiasm. It's a Churchill quote I stole, but he was such a dreamer. And he used to show me pictures of America when I was 7, 8 years old, and he convinced me that that was the place. So I went through the iterations. I wasn't, interestingly, I was kind of top of my class in school, and I was a decent athlete, not because I was good, because I secretly tried harder than everybody else.
Right.
I even got some very pretty girls to go to the prom with me because I probably was better trying hard without anybody knowing. So I dropped out of college. My dad got ill. I dreams initially of being an archaeologist or a zoologist, and I now have a wildlife foundation. So I achieved that dream backwards.
Yeah.
But I went off to England, and in the late 80s, being Irish in England was very tricky. I happened to be married to an incredibly aristocratic English woman now, so I totally sold out. But I went off to England. It was a tough time to be Irish. I had a really mediocre job at bottom of the rung, getting coffee for traders at Lehman Brothers. So I'm not the guy who broke. At least anyone calls in and says Sean Conlon broke Lehman, I knew it. And then I loaded mail trains at night. And I'm standing on the train platform one day. And as a child, I'd read. I'm a voracious reader. I still read a book a week, right? And if anyone wants to take one thing away, read. So I read about the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Churchills. And none of this is brag. It's just, this is a life story. Every one of those names I've mentioned to you have been to my Christmas party or my wedding. Serendipitously, not without any planning, but they ended up in my life. But so I read about these people, and I'm like, someday I want to be one of those American moguls. So I'm standing on the train platform one day, and I thought of a wonderful quote. He who dares wins, and I've used it in lots of my mottos. It's the SAS. And I got off the train, quit my average mediocre job, and went off to America with no plan and a 5th cousin. And I worked as a janitor in 1990. I worked as a janitor for 3 years. And I was arguably the worst janitor America had probably seen. And they've seen some pretty bad ones. I seem to hire them in all my buildings now. But
Right.
I was a terrible janitor, but a great dreamer. And I got my real estate license in 93. Worst time ever to get into the business. Interest rates had been coming off, being 16, 17%. Everybody said you should have been here in the 80s. You missed it. I would make 100 calls a night, work as a janitor in the day, then go and cold call at night. It was back when you could cold call people, and everyone would hang up at me and shout at me. And I was making about $14,000 a year in 93, to give you perspective. By 96, 97, I was generating $1 million a month in brokerage fees. And that was quick.
Very quick.
I make it sound very casual, but I approached it like a business back when they didn't. I was arguably one of the first people ever to have a team. I built a system. I identified a trend accidentally. It wasn't a vision. It was a being on the street and a gut instinct. I kind of identified the first of those 3 flat sort of development potentials in Chicago. And I went up and down every single street in Lakeview, knocking doors. I got 3 or 4 little builders. And I said, I got it. I'm going to be a one-stop shop. So there's 1,000 guys in Chicago who will tell you a story. But in 97, if you said, I want to be a builder, a developer, I'm tired being an attorney accountant, they're like, go and knock on Sean Conlon's office window at Koenig and Stray. He'll be there at midnight. So guys would knock. I could name 20 of them were still close friends of mine and were at my wedding. And they would come in the door and he'd say, hey, I'm working down at, whatever, Mayor Brown, or Winston and Strawn is one of my great stories, one of the guys from there. He said, I want to be a builder. So I take out a set of blueprints that I've bought. I take out a lot that I've tied up with my own down payment. I get him a contractor's name, an attorney's name, a finance bank, and he leaves me, goes home to his wife that night after work, and he's a developer. So I was one-stop shopping for them. And I got up to where by the end of the 90s, I was generating about $250 million of real estate sales a year, whatever figures they talk about. It was comfortably in those ranges, and probably more because of how much I referred out. But that was back when they didn't have $1 million listing. I was doing nearly $250 million.
Yeah, you know
real
what,
estate
that's
sales.
the thing that really interests me the most, because you were in New York or LA. What was your average deal size? Do you remember?
360,000.
360,000. Now, how big of a team did that? I mean, that's a lot of deals.
I didn't have a big team. That's what made it even more remarkable. I had 2 assistants, and at my peak, up to 4 people max.
Yeah.
And of course, of those 4 people, 3 of them are still the top 2 and 1, 2, and 3 roughly brokers in Chicago to this day. Anyone who's on my team, so I did something right.
Because I'm like, when I saw that you were doing over 200 million, you were the top broker in the United States, and this is all for residential right now.
Yeah.
Over 200 million. And I thought the deal size had to be fairly small. So that means you had to be closing multiple properties every week. So now the internet wasn't a big deal then.
No internet. Listen,
how are you doing? Excel spreadsheets?
One of my most interesting opportunities I had was an arbitrage, and I'll tell you what it was. The book would come out. Now, I sound like a dinosaur. This is great. I'm getting to sound like everybody's grandparents now at 55, because I've lived, dog years at 55. The book would get dropped off at midnight at the office where I worked, Leader Realty on Belmont. The book with every deal in it, right? Everything that was listed that month. So I'd be in the office, I'd get the book when it came in, and I would start to highlight the properties that I thought would be suitable for development or suitable for flipping.
Okay.
And I wasn't making the money flipping because I was a kind of naive broker. I was lending the money to guys to flip it.
Oh, okay.
For my brokerage fee. So that was my arbitrage. I tracked everything on spreadsheets, and I was doing something like 890 something deals a year. I mean, the reason I'm mad at 55 is it was all in my head. So much of it was in my head at the time. It was exhilarating in hindsight. They say, Joe, youth is wasted on the young. And the only thing I would tell every single broker on the planet or successful person on the planet, savor your victories, because I never did.
Oh,
I just never did.
Yeah, just on to the next.
Yeah, never savor them. So the end of the night. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, it's just something that you're doing 300, that many deals in a year with a team of 4, because, we didn't really have, did you have a computer then at all?
Coming to the end, I had a computer, but really not, no.
Yeah.
But I will tell you though, where I'm going to take a little bit of credit. For a guy who is technically stupid, I had a good understanding of the efficiencies that it created. So you might know the next bit of my story. If you don't, I'm about to tell you. So the end of 1999, I was on a 90% plus split, right?
Right.
Brokerage, 94% I was getting, right? All my expenses paid. And I got $1 million signing bonus in 97. to stay
Right.
for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I'm one of my closest friends and an investor of mine, Chris Chelius, is a great hockey player. And he still laughs to this day that I was getting paid more than guys who actually were doing something useful, like playing hockey and beating guys up.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. I got $1 million signing bonus. It was like you'd see in the sports, right?
That's unheard of.
The end of 99, I decided to walk. Yeah. I decided to walk away from $1 million and start my own company. And people thought I was nuts. So what I did was I would take out a full page ad every week, Joe, and stop me if I'm banging on too much. I would take out a full page ad every week before I started. I wouldn't say the name of the company, and I'd say announcing a bold new vision for real estate brokerage, and then I'd put in, apostrophes. Of course, that's like announcing a code of ethics for used car salesmen, and I'd put a phone number on it. That was it. Sure. This is all going on in December. Then the next I would say, I'm about to clean up the face of real estate. And then I put in, apostrophes on it. I just need to find the guys who handle that whole Exxon Valdez thing. So this got crazy buzz going. People in Chicago are like, what's going on? Full page ads, because I had the money to do it. I opened January 16th, 2000 on Roscoe, 2000 block of Roscoe. And I was the second largest user of Blackberries in North America in the early 2000s. Second largest user.
Team Blackberries.
Yeah, one. So people, all my competitors, and some of them have huge companies now because they stayed in the space and they said, oh, it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick. It was not a gimmick. We even had an app. So I would give a buyer a laptop, a seller a laptop, and they would have, on the real estate, they would have an email or a text that if you had an email question, you press that button and it emailed us. So that would have been a forerunner to an app, I mean, today you'd call it an app. So we were the second largest users of Blackberries. Our efficiency was off the charts. In about 14 months, I grew my sales from 0 to $1 billion.
In 14 months, that was
14
how many agents did you have at that time?
At that point, it was getting fairly decent. At that point, it was like maybe 180, 200. But I wasn't selling anymore.
How many agents did you up with?
I would say at some point 500 or something like that. But then I sold the company.
Oh, hold on one second. 500 agents? You were.
Yeah.
I'm in commercial real estate. I own a broker. Just, getting recruiting and bringing it. It's kind of like herding cats, right? You're pitching all over.
Yeah.
How did you manage to hire that many agents?
So it's going to sound a little, well, it's not. I was by far the biggest broker in Chicago by a multitude of 10. My next closest competitor was maybe 20 million. I was 200 million. So people are like, oh my God, he must have a magic elixir. And so with the Blackberries and the cool offices, all the cool kids joined me, right? Okay. And what I did differently in 2000 was people joined me from, Goldman Sachs. Some of my best agents came from places like McKinsey. These incredible people making career changes joined me. And to this day, one of the girls who joined me runs this incredible travel company. She runs all my stuff. But at that time, she helped put all our branding together. Okay. The guy who did my branding for me ended up running all global digital branding for CNN and won Emmys. So I had a superstar team. And it's impossible to hire right now. I'm so bad at now, but everybody who left there, including my PA, she now runs one of the largest real estate brokerage companies in America, and she was my 21-year-old assistant.
No,
so there was magic in the room. There was magic in that room for several years, and then I sold it to like Century 21 Sending, but I kept an ownership like 20% or something. Yeah. And then I bought it back for 10 cents on the dollar.
They ran it into
the ground? Because they lost their way, and I rebuilt it and sold it again.
And over what time frame?
3 years, maybe.
You turned it around in 3 years. You must have been living in the office again.
Yeah, I mean, I was again. And I still admire the secret to being an incredibly good real estate broker truly is working harder than anyone else. But then there's other bits of magic. And then how old are you, Joe? Not to ask you because you're very young looking. How old are you?
I'm 60 years old.
I wish I looked like you then when I was 50. I'm 55. You learn that balance is important if you get it right. Like I am much better now with balance. So I'm going to go out and walk around my farm tonight here and look at my animals and stuff like that. And I'll be fired up in the morning to work again. But it was an incredibly exhilarating time in hindsight. We really were, crusading. We were way out in front of everybody at the time. Now people catch up very quickly because there's no patents you can copy us. But at the time we were cutting edge. We really were the first.
If it's working well, people are going to copy it. Now you had to have a mix of really experienced agents, and to get that many agents, you had to be bringing in a lot of newer people too, correct? And so your training program must have been top of market as well.
It was at the time, but I can tell you something that's kind of interesting now, because my last company I built, I sold to Compass.
Okay.
But my business model in 2000 was I was going to charge a 2% brokerage fee.
Okay.
And pay my agents a salary.
Oh, okay.
And I did that for about 8 months. And every time I train up an agent and they get really good, they get recruited away.
Yeah.
And I was being idealistic. I thought I'm going to change the real estate industry, right? The US government can't change the real estate industry.
Right.
So I said, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to flip my model. I'm going to charge 6%.
Right.
My business took off like a rocket.
Yeah.
The silly 2% model confused people. But it was an exhilarating time. And again, tough markets, but that's when the opportunity is, because everybody gives up.
Well, that's exactly everything I'm hearing is you almost look forward. You're kind of like Sam Zell there in Chicago, right? You're looking for the opportunity, and you find it in the down markets. And so
he was called the grave dancer. We actually were neighbors. We lived beside each other on the beach in Malibu.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And he was very nice. I said, hello, Mr. Zell. I admire what you've done. You're great. And he says nothing. He walks back and he says, who are you? I said, Sean Conlon. He says, we've done pretty good too, kid. And then we never talked again. It was perfect. That's the sort of neighborhood relationship I want on a beach in Malibu.
Exactly.
He ignored me. Yeah, he ignored me. I ignored him. It was heaven.
Yeah.
But what I really, truly believe I am the ultimate contrarian, right? I go against the grain. Right. What I do right now is I'm totally going against the grain in my new businesses. But yeah, I went against the grain. And when everybody's leaving the building, I'm going back into it, right? That's how I operate. I'm most comfortable. There's a great quote. The last point on that, there's a great quote that sometimes that warm feeling you get is because you're at the center of the herd. That confidence and warmth is because you're centered. When you're cold and scared, good chance you're leading the herd.
Yeah.
And I love that quote.
It's a good one. Now I know Conlon Commercial. I guess it's CRE Advisors now. You've got Andrea Doyle and Steve Horvath over there. First of all, great hires, incredible people. We send, they're part of our affiliate network, and they're just
they're fantastic. They actually, top notch. They're incredible. I've known Steve. I met Steve in like 94, 93, because I wouldn't rent an apartment to him. I totally discriminated against him and rented the apartment to 3 really beautiful girls. And I come down that weekend to say hello to them. He's sitting on the couch. I kid you not, because he was so smooth. He said, this is discrimination, Mr. Conlon. You could get sued. And we've been friends ever since.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a rock star. And Andrea's brilliant. They actually bought Conlon Commercial off me last year. They own it now.
Oh, they do? Okay. All right. Yeah, I saw the name change, but I wasn't sure. But I've just always been impressed, and it seems like I was looking at your background, and I can see why you've had such success, as you tend to hire quality people the way it seems. So those two are pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I could be they're fantastic. And you know what? Stevie and Andrea have handled the sale of like a $68 million VA hospital down in, Georgia for me. I mean, they're unbelievable what they can do. Stevie helped me roll out a student housing company all over Europe. I mean, this versatility is amazing. And then she's brilliant behind him. She fixes everything that him and I would screw up. So yeah. Well, that's very nice of you to say. And make sure you tell them we were talking.
I'll send them a copy of the video because I've always been impressed.
Perfect.
But now, so you've had all this success in real estate, and now you're out there. You've got
lots of failures, Joe. Lots of failures.
Yeah, I want to talk about. You know what? Let's do that. Let's go right now. Let's talk about what's your biggest failure.
So, firstly, they say leaders are inspired by mountaintops and matured by valleys. I would be doing my number of failures injustice if I named one specifically.
Okay.
I've had numerous ones, and I will go first. Not following my instinct has been a huge thing. So in 2007, I'd sold most of my stuff, including my brokerage. And with a group of investors, I lent out $100 million of mezzanine money. And I lent it because I was watching the hedge funds and not following my instinct that was telling me something wasn't right. So in the sense, I sold all my stuff because something didn't feel right, but I doubted myself, and I figured all these Wall Street guys were better. So I lent out $100 million of mezzanine money in 2006 and 7 to residential developers. Now I'm going to brag. I spent 5 years of my life that I'm not getting back, but I got all that money back. I took all the real estate back. The one thing I'd done right was I'd lent to individuals who I wouldn't hire. So there should be your first tip, right?
Yes.
But I also lent against real estate I could get comfortable with. So I took back real estate in Palm Beach. I took real estate back in North Carolina. I took a ton of real estate back in Austin, Texas. And I still own some of that. So you can imagine how that looks now. And I took that back in 2000, 2011. But for 5 years, I was choked up to here. I did some pretty bad hotel deals, and that was because it seemed sexy. So to answer your question, the biggest mistake I ever made was I gave up control.
Yeah. Now,
I invested behind people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can be hard when you give up that control. We're seeing a lot of GPs right now that, the last several years, it's been pretty easy to raise money, go out and do deals. And now that things are, you're seeing distributions have stopped, there's some problems happening there. And it's tough when you're.
So I've tracked all that. And I've rarely raised money. The other great thing was for people who invest in me, generally I have more skin in the game than anyone.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that, there's a great expression. I've been watching it. History may not always repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
And I've seen this at 55. I've seen this cycle maybe 4 or 5 times, right? And even a turkey will fly in a hurricane. Anyone who got into the business after 08, 09 looked like a genius.
Yeah.
And I love that expression because it was said about me in 2006 by an old Southerner when somebody was telling him how amazing I was. And he looked me up and down, and he was wearing a seersucker suit. And he said, "Son, sometimes even a turkey will fly in a hurricane." And I left the building. I thought, what a compliment. And then I was like, hang on a second. That wasn't a compliment.
It was the opposite of.
So, yeah.
It's kind of like when a Southern lady says, "Bless your heart."
Yeah. Oh, bless your little heart.
Yeah. Bless your little heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I would say I'm kind of dealing with a situation right now, which is mind boggling. And I invested a lot of money with a person I've known for 20 years. Yeah. And when I got in trouble, I showed my true character. I was a good guy, and I fought to get everybody their penny back. They say meet success like a gentleman and failure like a man. So this guy, very well-known Wall Street billionaire, was always a gentleman when he was winning. The minute things got tough, he behaved badly. So this guy's 70 years old, and in hindsight, of course he was a gentleman. He was always winning, and the minute he didn't win, he acted like a child. So I'm in a fight with him right now. And his attorney described me as a honey badger, so we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
fight the whole way. I told him, as I've told lots of people, I said, you know what? I said, I will fight you till hell freezes over, and then we'll fight on the ice.
yeah. Yeah, it's different times. People are willing to walk away a lot faster than when you and I were growing up. Your word had a lot of value. And now,
You know, you focused in on something, and I didn't mean to dominate the conversation. I
no.
apologize, but I haven't discussed real estate or anything like this for years. This is my
Oh,
first
yeah.
one. I grew up in a world, and you did, where you borrowed the money, you paid it back. And I was trying to identify where it changed, and I'm going to tell you where. 2008, right? Here's what happened.
Mhm.
Good people like me and you, I paid every penny back I owed.
Yep.
But we noticed our neighbors down the street who didn't pay it back got off.
Yeah.
And then we started to realize that that was a strategy. So I've noticed the psychic shift in America, particularly, that people realize, and no one's not technically to be paid back. You decide if you want. That's when it changed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy for people to just walk away now. And I don't know. I don't know if you've got to really think about that when you're investing with people.
Yeah.
I search for people like you that are out there that are going to have more skin in the game than I am. If you're
Yeah.
going to be the GP, great. If you've got more than I don't care if you're going to
Yeah.
make more in the end, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure that there's going to be
Yeah.
you could lose more too. It's
I
just
always have lots of skin in the game, and then I fight for my investors like,
right.
like an alley cat.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Well, growing up, I mean,
Yeah.
the town you grew up in, I'm sure it's not a big town. It's actually a village, right?
Yeah. 800 people growing up. And
Yeah.
listen, it was a tough place. You had the
Sure.
lovely place, but you had to fight. You had to fight for what you want. You might be hungry some night going to bed, but you fought your corner. I was a little guy, but my nickname since I was 4 years old was Cocky. They said I wasn't afraid of anything. So very funnily, national television in 2006 wanted to do 2006 was it? 2006 wanted to do a documentary on national television about me.
Mhm.
So they come into town asking about Sean Conlon. And everyone's like, no, we don't know any Sean Conlon. Then one fellow says, hang on a second. Cocky Conlon. Yeah, then they had 100 stories. No one knew my first name. Cocky was what they called me for some reason. Probably because I was insecure.
Well, it worked, So to go from being a janitor to a number one salesperson in residential real estate in the '90s, early '90s. I mean, you had to have something. It wasn't just you had to have a charisma, a charm, ability to sell, and then to go out and achieve what you achieve by, 200 million with doing over 300 deals a year. Christ's sakes, man. I don't know how you were even sleeping.
800 deals a
Or
year.
excuse me, 800 deals. Yeah. 800 deals a year. I just am like, that's, I don't know when you slept, but
Well, I worked 7 days a week. I got up at 5 a.m. and I was in the office lots of nights, midnight, 1 a.m. I will tell you a couple of things. I think I was a fairly average person who achieved extraordinary things because I believed I could. I truly believe that. But I was a reader and I have a memory. And I spoke at Wharton some years ago, and they introduced me, said, the greatest salesman in the world, and all those wonderful, superlatives that are not fully true, but they sound lovely. And somebody said, it must be your charisma, it must be your gift of the gab. I said, no, the greatest salespeople in the world listen.
Yep.
And while I'm being chatty here now, Joe, if you and I were in a business meeting, you would do all the talking and I would listen and then I would talk. But because you're interviewing me and I'm doing all the talking, but if you're a good salesperson, listen, because your clients will tell you what's important and what they want. And not for you to sell them something they don't want. They will tell you what is important.
Mm-hmm. I think we were raised very much the same, Sean. I'm from a town of 281 people. It's actually classified as a village in central Nebraska. And
I love it.
My father said to me, he goes, one day he was just mad at me because I guess I was talking to him. He goes, Joe, just shut that up. He goes, you've got two ears and one mouth for a reason. Just stop and listen for a while. And that has always stuck with me. And
I love
obviously you're repeating it too. So you're exactly right. People will tell you what they want if you stop talking and listen. And, there's a lot out there right now. You know, everybody's opinion trumps the facts. You know, you've got to be. It's a different time, and but I think.
So
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. I'll tell you what has changed so quickly. In the medieval times, you and I could run around your village in Nebraska and say, Mary Jane's a witch, Mary Jane's a witch, Mary Jane's a witch. And we could get her burnt, right?
Yeah.
That's what would happen. Then print media came along, and actually the facts were there and you'd read them. Then the internet came along and you were able to run around the village again, only online from your basement screen. Mary Jane's a witch, Mary Jane's a witch, let's burn her.
Yeah.
We've gone backwards. That's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to reset myself. So by being in Ireland in the country, so I have a home in London, I have a farm in Ireland, and I actually then live in the Virgin Islands. That's where my merchant bank is based.
Okay.
But I'm in places now where the technology is not as important. And I read certain things, so I know what's going on in the world. But I mean, you only have to look at the American politics and how crazy we've gotten. I mean, I went to the Americas. So growing up in Ireland and everywhere in the world, we wanted to go to America. Why? John Wayne didn't lose, you know, John Wayne, right? You know, Cary Grant, the country that stormed the beaches on D-Day and only asked for enough land to bury its dead. Okay, that was America. You guys modestly went to the moon. I mean, what an incredible generation. You saved the world twice, no fuss. You went home then to the farms in Nebraska. So we grew up looking at you guys saying, how can these guys be so unbelievable and be so modest? I mean, incredible. I was enamored with America, and I love America for what it's given me, but I'm very disappointed with it right now, because what an amazing country that's screwing itself up, you know. Now, but every country goes through these, and I'm not picking a political size, but every country goes through these convulsions, and sometimes it finds the center, and I hope it does.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's such an amazing place for opportunity.
I absolutely, I love this country, and I just am amazed that we're going through this. I hate to see it, the divide, but hopefully we do get through it. I want to ask you, I grew up on a farm, so tell me a little bit about your farm real quick. Then I want to get into your merchant bank and what you're doing right now. But
okay, so
what are you raising anything on your farm, or are you leasing it all out?
No, so here, no, not even leasing it. So here's the gig. I grew up dreaming of owning an estate, right? That's what you do. The British lords own the estate. My wife happens to own an incredibly fabulous place. If you've ever watched Succession, that show, I don't know if you have, but so where they had the wedding, where they ran into the lake, that's my wife's home. That's my wife's house.
All right.
And
Does she let you stay there once in a while?
Yeah, sometimes. That was her ringing in. I said, I'm on a podcast, don't call me. So she calls me. So that's her home. And that's what a proper sort of aristocrat, royal person lives in.
Right.
Now, I grew up looking at these estates. So I bought this beautiful country estate in Ireland. It's not too fancy, but it's a little fancy. A mile of my own salmon river. There's all sorts of, the house is nearly 400 years old. There's all sorts of tunnels and forts in it. So I've been planting wildflower meadows, planting woods, redoing all the old buildings. So I'm working the whole time, and I bought my first tractor. So that's the sort of farm I have. They call it a gentleman's farm.
You do know how to run that tractor, don't you?
I just learned. Yeah, very proud of
I was going to say, I'll come over and show you how to do it. So
they're pretty fancy now, so they are, Joe. They nearly drive themselves.
Oh,
so that's my farm.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, now, Sean, you've taken all this success and you've opened this merchant bank, and you have 7 offices, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you got Chicago, Dallas, London, LA, New York, Palm Beach, and St. Croix and Virgin Islands, where you're living. What exactly are you doing with this merchant bank?
Okay. So over my life, I developed the most unbelievable network you can imagine, right?
Oh,
yeah. And
globally,
it's a $1 trillion network. The network, like, the net worth of the people at my Christmas party that I used to throw every year in Mayfair in London was over 900 billion at my party, right?
Ooh.
And I never monetized it or used it in any way. And Mayor Daly is the chairman emeritus of my board. So his network makes mine look like a joke. And I'm flattered that he chose my company to affiliate with. But I had this incredible network. And then I never lost my ability to see things other people don't as far as in deals. And my speciality, and this is what we are, is uber complicated, distress, stranded assets. It includes things like several thousand acres of land in Texas I bought out of a 10-year lawsuit, right? It includes a company that the founder's been in jail for 12 years for real crimes, nothing related to the business. And he's got 30 million people using his software.
Oh.
It includes companies all around the world, but no one could deal with the owners or the kids. Or I own assets where I bought a whole pool of assets where the family hadn't spoken to each other for 30 years. And I managed to get them all to sell to me. My speciality is uber complicated distress deals. And that's what I do. So it's just doing what I did as a broker / developer and taking it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, you're essentially, you're just doing deals at a different level. What made you, I mean, is that a big niche, or you don't want a big niche? You just want to, you want to do a couple deals a year. What made you want to pick that
Hey,
path?
listen, the one company I bought, I would sit in the jail once a month in Germany for over 2 years. And it's the jail where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf.
Oh boy.
And it's probably worth 200 times what I bought it for. I don't need a big niche at that level. When you've got 30 million people using your thing a month or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, it's crazy. So it makes, you know, it makes my little merchant bank $1 billion business. But I do 2 deals a year at most, and they're deals I do. I'm generally at least 50% to 70% of the capital. And my investor list is blue chip beyond belief. You pick some of the oldest family names in America, they're in my deals, and in England. But everybody in my deal, I've known for over 20 years. I don't have any new people. And that is nice because I had investors who were new.
Go ahead.
What's that, Joe?
I say you haven't changed
your
methodology, your process either, because you're still the lead investor with putting the most money in.
Yeah, and I'm also, like, I went out and I would knock doors in the Lakeview neighborhood in Chicago and climb fences, and I would would nearly like photographically remember every lot in the street, and some of them are a foot or two longer. Well, I identify these opportunities that nobody can find, and no one could get into the German prison system. But I knew a guy whose, whatever, father had been the minister for prison, and I got myself in. So no different, just the figures are different. The complications no different. It's the same.
You haven't changed since day one. You're still the guy that wants to do the deal, and you want to be the best at doing the deal.
Yeah, but I've grown as a person. So I've changed lots of things about myself. I wouldn't recognize myself if I went back and talked to the young 23, 24-year-old Sean thing. But the fundamental skill set is the same.
Right.
But my attitude to things are very different. And when I used to lose a deal, I would get sick. But I never lost the thing not to give up. So I bought a deal that fell apart 42 times over 2.5 years. And all my investors give up, and I end up buying it with my own money.
Yeah.
And then I brought them all in at 10x to start the process. So I've that quality where I never, ever, 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 ever give up on something I truly believe in. But I also do know when to walk away. And there's a time.
Yeah.
And as you get older, the most valuable asset, Joe, you and I have is time.
Yeah, I agree. And also your gut
my
feeling.
theory.
You talked about in an interview a property you bought in Chicago, and you brought in, I think it was Ralph Lauren you put in there. And,
yes, you've done your homework. Yes.
Yeah, I did. I was like, this guy, your gut feeling is pretty on. Can you kind of walk us through that story? Because I was amazed. I'm like, you took huge risks there, and you only had one partner on the deal other than yourself.
Yeah, and he still invests with me. I just talked to him yesterday. It was his 56th birthday, and I called him yesterday, and he was in Saint-Tropez, so he's done well.
Right.
And he's a good old boy from Iowa.
Oh, okay.
And his claim to fame is he's the really handsome guy who looks like George Clooney, who was in the Gatorade ad playing against Michael Jordan back in the day.
Oh, really?
So Tim and I did tons of deals together, Tim Sullivan. And I was sitting in the Starbucks every day because one of my theories early on was the Starbucks were a really good demographic. Like they had resources I didn't have. So if I saw Starbucks, I knew that neighborhood was on fire. Nowadays, the neighborhood's already done. But back in 93, 94, they were going in first because they'd done their homework. So I'm sitting on Armitage Avenue in the Starbucks, and I'm looking at this building across the street, and it's got a Wild West cowboy boot store in the bottom. And I'm like, I don't know much. But what I had at that point, Joe, is I traveled already enough with the little bit of money I'd made to see the locations in London and Paris and Milan, and travel, in addition to being fatal to bigotry, as Mark Twain said, you will see trends developing years in advance in other places. You just will. So I noticed that in those places, and I said, this is the corner of Main and Main, because I did lots of Walgreen deals as of later on, same logic.
Yep.
And I said, but this is screaming out because I knew the sort of houses I was selling, right? I was selling $2 million houses then, back in the early, whenever it was, 2.5 in Lincoln Park. I said, this is a Ralph Lauren store. This is one of those brands. And kept calling Ralph Lauren until they called back, and they came out and they paid, if I remember correctly, $83 a square foot, where the going rate in the street at the time was 38. And so I bought it for 2-point-something million. And once we got them in there, stabilized for a year, I think we sold it. I can't remember. Was it 11 or 12 or 10.5? But it was crazy.
Big number. I'm like, damn, that was a nice win. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the.
I love it.
And I never savored it. I didn't realize till I look back now that those sort of things were amazing.
Yeah, I think, when you're having success and you're busy like that, you don't really take the time to really appreciate what you've just accomplished. And, we have agents that we've got one. I just called her last night. I said, you should really be proud of what you're doing, because, she's been in business for 3 years, and she's knocking out of the park, and she's just so busy right now. I said, you need to step back and look what you're accomplishing. And because it's pretty amazing. And I think people, when you start having those wins, you don't want to look over them. It's important.
It's just a shame. And, look, I've no regrets. I've blazed a trail. It's been, you wouldn't make it up. If you look at my life, I mean, it has been amazing. Lots of downs. I just want you to remember that in 2010, I was owed over 100 million, and I sold my car for 31,000 to meet payroll.
Yeah. There's usually downs.
So I was up. Yeah, and that was down. And I was kind of chubby at the time, and now I was walking like a couple of miles in the snow to work every day in Chicago. And people were like, wow, you're really losing weight. And I was like, yeah, I had to sell my car to meet payroll. They're like, you're so full of shit. But I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
I really was. Now, I kept all my assets, though. I didn't sell any of my homes that, had real value. I held on to them. I didn't sell any of my art. I kept everything together. I just skint off anything I didn't need.
Right.
And I stayed in the game. I just needed to be in the game, and I would be back. But I don't want to do that again. I've no interest.
Well, you probably got a few more cars you could get rid of before your main one, no doubt, or even a tractor now. So what's next for Sean? What are you doing next?
Well, I'm really working on the team, because it's harder and harder to hire the sort of people I want.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to build my team out right now in St. Croix. I love my little merchant bank, and I call it little, but we punch way above our weight. Like, we're at the table with the big boys lots of the time.
Yeah.
But I have the balance. I have a wonderful, wonderful life in London, but it's one of the wealthiest countries in the planet forever. So you meet the most interesting people for business. I've become, interestingly enough, the thing people don't know about me is I've always spent 80% of my personal time alone. So my sales thing is a show. I love being alone. Despite me hosting parties for 500 people every year, I used to do two. One in Chicago, I'd hop on a jet, fly to London and host one 2 nights later for another 500. I love being on my own.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the simple things, like much, much more. And I'm getting a second chance in life because everything happens so fast. And I got so many things, and I got so many fancy cars. I don't need any of those things anymore. I've got one nice little car here, and I've got one little classic car that I have in storage that was a dream car.
What kind of
But I
car is
appreciate.
that? You can't glaze over that. I got to know that one.
No, so it's a 1969 Mercedes 280 convertible, the beautiful old one. You might have seen it in The Hangover.
Okay, yeah.
If you've ever, and it came
Nice.
out of the factory the same month I was born.
Okay.
So, and then I drive kind of, appropriate countryside trucky things. But I collect art. I have a wildlife foundation, do a huge amount of animal rescue stuff.
Okay.
And I get up every morning at 5:30 a.m. and I take a walk along my river. I'm finally savoring my victories. I'm a little bit like one of those centurions who has been in the Colosseum for so long, and now I'm happy walking out looking at my plants. But I'm still in the fight maybe once a week.
Yep.
Not
That's
every
powerful.
minute.
I'm a little jealous. I've got a really bad bug to get back to having a small ranch. Nothing that I have to work, but because you and I both know how much work those ranches can be. I do get it, and just being out in nature and quiet. And I'm like you, probably 80% of my time is alone. And maybe that's our upbringing coming from the small towns. I don't know, but I find peace in that. But also, I get in my head and I get a lot done. So,
or maybe that's why I'm on your podcast, and people who spend time on their own know themselves best.
Yeah, could be, right. At least we'll stick with that anyway.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that because I've learned. I'm 55 and I'm just nearly figured myself out.
It's hard, and you change.
Yeah.
You're always evolving, and the world's evolving, and so I just think that time alone is, honestly, Sean, most successful people that I know do a lot of time alone. John Paul DeJoria was a client for years, and Paul Mitchell Hair Care, and that dude,
I know Michaelaine, his daughter.
Oh, do you know her? Okay, yeah. Oh, I've got stories about her when she was a little kid. I had to go pick her up a couple times.
Oh, that's hilarious. Do you still talk to her or no?
I have not for years. I have not. She's right here in Malibu, and
yeah, I saw her at Chris Shelley. So I lived in Malibu and Broad Beach. I had a place for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I got to know her and all them very well, and John McEnroe and all that through Chris Shelley, who's the coolest hockey player on the planet. So I just saw her, had a lovely chat with her at his, they were doing his jersey and, hanging it up in the rafters, and a super clever girl. She's running the business, but I could see him being quite introverted,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, did you go to John Paul's house on Broad Beach?
No, I would go. I would hang out with them at Chelius's house. No, I didn't even know it was on Broad Beach.
He had one. I don't know if he still does. I sold it to him because he gave me a directive. He goes, Joe, I need a gift for my wife. I want a house on the water in Malibu. I'm like, okay, what's the price point? He told me the price point. I go, are you kidding me? I can't get you a shack for that. He goes, get it done. And so I sent a letter up and down the coast of Malibu. And I didn't do residential, so I didn't really know. So I sent it up and down. I made sure everybody that was in the MLS is listed. They didn't get a letter. I didn't. Some of the residential agents had pocket listings. They called me all pissed off that I sent their client a letter, but I wasn't trying to get a listing.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I got a call from an agent that said, listen, I've got this house on Broad Beach. It needs work. It's close to your price points, about 500 grand more, but we might need to go. So I need to get this sold in the next 2 weeks. So I called John Paul and I said, hey, we've got a house for sale on Broad Beach. He goes, come get me. I go, you've got 9 cars. Why do I have to come get you? He goes, come get me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So
that's great.
he just wanted to talk, I think. So, and I was in Malibu. So I went up to his house in Malibu, picked him up, brought him out there. Because yeah, I want that. The chandelier that was hanging. Nobody knew that this artist that chandelier that made that chandelier was well known, and it was very
Of course,
expensive.
he did.
He did. So, and he ended up getting it. And so we ended up buying that house. They edited Gone with the Wind in the basement. So, and he bought it, gave it to his wife, and I think they still own it. And that was 20 years ago, I'd say. So, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So I bought my place in 2008 in Malibu.
Okay.
And I own the Gessner house at the top of Broad Beach. You know that beautiful one that looks like so Sam Zell owned the Occidental Petroleum House out on the top of Broad Beach, that beautiful low Lochner house.
Okay, yeah.
Then the next one in was this one that looked like the Sydney Opera House with the big windows.
Right.
And that was my house. That was my house.
Wow.
And I dreamed of living in Malibu on the beach, and I had the most incredible house there for 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Do you own anything in Malibu still?
No, listen, the taxing is ludicrous. Like, I'm in St. Croix, there's the most unbelievable tax treatment there for federal income tax.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. It's a smart move. But, well, Sean, thank you very much. This has been amazing. When you come to LA, let's get together and grab a Guinness. I want to continue having this conversation. I look forward to it.
Listen, you've been amazing. It's been my first one since I quit the show. So it's 3 years since I've done something like this, I think. Let me ask you one last thing. Where are you now in LA?
I'm in Brentwood.
Okay.
Brentwood, yeah. Yeah.
So my best man, when I got married, had the most beautiful house in Brentwood. And he's kind of in the TV business, a guy called David E. Kelly. I'm off to fish with him in September, but he was my best man. But my God, he had a beautiful house in Brentwood. Yeah, he gave the most unbelievable speech. You know, he writes shows. I don't know if you've ever come across him.
I know the name. Yeah,
he's so talented. So he was my best man, and he hadn't written a speech, and he gave the most Stevie Horvath was at the wedding. He gave the most unbelievable speech in that big castle, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. He was unbelievable, and he roasted me. They're fabulous. Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much.
You bet. I appreciate it, Sean. You really built something here, and it sounds like you're employing a lot of good people. And I just happen to know two of them very well, and appreciate working with them. So we'll have to get you back on down the road. Don't wreck that tractor.
I won't. And when you tell them we had a chat, and you know what? The great thing about Ireland here, it's like 8 o'clock at night and it's bright out. I'm going out now to do a little bit of work.
All right. Go do a little fishing. Get your dinner for yourself.
All right. This is
Joe,
thank you, Sean. A million, buddy.
And thank you, everybody that's been watching. If you could, please give us a like. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.